sometimes I like to make things more difficult than they really need to be, and that was very much the case with my Tronxy X3S. I ended up replacing the stock control board, and when I did that, I also picked up this TFT32 touchscreen controller. And the main reason I did that was because when I was having trouble with the stock control board on the X3S, this LCD screen wouldn't work. So I picked up this TFT32 as like a backup, just in case this LCD controller was burnt out. But when this showed up, it didn't come with any instructions. The listing on Amazon didn't have any information on where to like get firmware and stuff like that, or how to set it up. It took me a few days to figure out how to set the baud rate to let this communicate with the MKS 1.5. So in this video, I want to show you how to update the firmware on the TFT32. And this should work for the TFT28, although I'm not sure because I've never used it. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. Okay, so in order to get to the updated firmware, what you need to do is you can either go to the link, you can go to this link, I'll have it in the video description, or you can go to Google and type in MKS TFT32 firmware update. And it's the first, for me it's the first link, but it's the GitHub MakerBase MKS. If you click on that and then just go ahead and download the zip. So once that's downloaded and you open it up, it'll show a folder MKS TFT master. Open that, open the firmware, and then you'll see a couple different options for the firmware. What I'm going to use is the TFT2832 V3, and then you'll see, open that, you'll see blue and red style. Just go ahead and pick whichever one you want. Then you'll have 3 more folders that'll say classic, retro, and simple. This is just the different interface styles that they have. So I'm going to go with classic, and I'm going to extract that to my desktop. Once you have that extracted to your desktop, open up, and you're going to find a file called MKS Config. Now this is the firmware file that you're going to need to change in order to get your TFT32 to talk with your MKS board. The first thing we have here is printer type settings. This is going to ask you what kind of firmware you're running. I'm running Marlin, so I'm going to set that to 1. The next thing it's going to ask is if it's a normal Cartesian printer or if it's a Delta printer. Then it's going to ask you your baud rate, and you're going to set this to whatever your baud rate is set to in your firmware. So in my case, I'm using 11.5200, so I'll set this to 3. This is very important. If you don't set this to the right value, it's not going to communicate with the board, and you're not going to be able to use the TFT to control the printer. The 3 things that we're most worried about in this video are the main board firmware, the machine settings, so if it's a Cartesian printer or a Delta printer, and then the baud rate. Everything else, you'll have to explore on your own to figure out what you want to change and what you want to leave the same, and etc., etc. So once we're done with that, we just save it, copy this to an SD card or a USB drive. The next thing we need to do is we need to make sure we have the right file system enabled. So we'll go ahead and power it on, and yours will probably look a little different if it's brand new and you haven't updated the firmware yet. But what you need to do is go to set and then look for file system. So file system, and then choose the file system that you're going to be using to update the firmware. So I'm going to select that, I'm going to hit back, I'm going to insert my card, and then all I have to do is restart it. So I'm going to power down the printer, I'm going to power it back on, and when it boots up, it's going to update automatically. So there you have it. That's how you can easily update your firmware on the TFT32. Again, it should work with the TFT28, but I'm not sure since I've not worked with it or used it. The key to it really is the baud rate and just setting up the firmware. So if you like this video and you're interested in seeing some more 3D printing videos, consider subscribing or at least checking out some of my other videos. Other than that, thanks for watching and have a good one.